Under the crimson moon, a masked figure stood atop a cliff. From the edge, he gazed upon dozens of pairs of red eyes that were fixed on him. Those were the eyes of the goblins, who soon revealed themselves and began sprinting towards him. The man swiftly dispatched the goblins, putting an end to their threat. The scene shifted to a merchant riding in a cart, pursued by a mob of goblins. Terrified, the merchant cried out for help. Fortunately, a group of adventurers arrived and swiftly dealt with the goblins. Behind the towering walls that surrounded the city, someone stood guard, dressed in tattered clothing and clutching his rumbling stomach. He was Fate Graphite. The adventurers who had successfully defeated the goblins returned to the city with their spoils. Fate overheard their conversations and felt inadequate, knowing that his gluttony skill only made his stomach growl incessantly. The story continued as the adventurers shopped for supplies, and at that moment, the Holy Knights arrived. They were members of the Vlerick family trio. As they walked, a merchant accidentally rolled his fruit towards their path, hitting one of the three knights. The merchant promptly apologized and retrieved the fallen fruit. When he picked it up, he was kicked, causing him to stumble, and he then prostrated himself and begged for forgiveness. Fate, still on guard and clutching his growling stomach, observed as the Holy Knights approached. They ordered Fate to take over their guard duty. After completing the task, Raphael tossed him his payment and instructed Fate to pick it up. However, as he reached for the money, Hado stepped forward and scornfully stomped on Fate's hand. He continued by kicking Fate's growling stomach, leaving him unable to react. Hado then kicked him again in the abdomen. Wincing in pain, Fate clutched his stomach. Raphael, seeing Fate in agony, tried to help him stand, but as he was about to get up, Hado once again stepped in and stomped on his head. Witnessing this, a woman intervened and stopped the three brothers' actions. She was Roxy Hark. She scolded them and urged them to cease their actions. Unwilling to engage in further debate, they left Roxy and Fate behind. Having successfully halted the Vlerick brothers' actions, Roxy extended her hand to Fate, who was bleeding from Hado's attacks. Without taking Roxy's hand, Fate stood up on his own and gazed in the direction the Vlerick brothers had gone. As he watched them depart, Roxy gently wiped the bloodstains from Fate's face. With a flushed face, Fate thanked Roxy. He felt it was her responsibility. Roxy then asked Fate to hand over the flag, a symbol that marked the end of Fate's guard duty. He assured her that he would inform her if such an incident occurred again, to which she replied that it was fine since she was already accustomed to it. Fate then walked away, leaving Roxy alone. The moon shone beautifully amidst the city's lights. In a restaurant, Fate sat in a corner, enjoying a piece of bread and soup. As he savored his meal, he was taken aback by the words of the restaurant owner, who offered him some advice. After hearing the advice, Fate left the restaurant with a slightly irritated expression. Fate was walking in the midst of a dark road, lamenting about the abilities he possessed. As he was lost in thought about his situation, he noticed a gang of thieves jumping over a fence. Without hesitation, he ran to report it to Roxy. After hearing Fate's report, Roxy handed him the flag. She unsheathed her sword and rushed to apprehend the thieves. Under the blue moon, the clash of swords and the cries of the thieves resounded. Suddenly, the noise ceased, making Fate believe that the battle was over, which relieved him. However, a figure cloaked in dark hood was sprinting from the darkness toward Fate. Startled, he intended to run, but when he attempted to move, his steps were halted. He didn't want to cause trouble for Roxy, as she had entrusted him with guarding the place. Fate reassured himself and then turned around, pointing the flag, which also doubled as a spear, at the approaching man. The man was injured, then raised one of his hands towards Fate. Seeing what the man did, Fate swung his spear and pierced the man's chest. The man coughed up blood and collapsed on the ground. Blood spurted, and the man remained motionless. Fate had defeated him. At the same time, a voice echoed, stating that the gluttony skill had activated. Fate received additional status and 2 new skills. He was surprised that his previously considered useless skill had activated and caused him to release the flag he was holding. Not long after Fate killed one of the thieves, Roxy ran over to him. She was concerned about Fate's condition and held his hand, inquiring about how he was doing. As Roxy held his hand, she unintentionally activated her newly acquired telepathy skill, allowing her to read Roxy's thoughts. After Roxy realized that Fate was alright, she then let go of his hand and mentioned that she would report the incident. Fate, not wanting to create more trouble if Raphael found out about his actions, asked Roxy to handle everything on her own. Roxy accepted Fate's suggestion, but because she felt indebted to him, she extended an offer for Fate to work for the Hart family. Fate was taken aback upon hearing Roxy's offer. After some consideration, Fate accepted her offer. The scene shifted to where Fate was checking his status, which had now increased to 3 digits, and he had gained 2 new skills. He was perplexed by what was happening to his body. Fate contemplated that with his current status, he might be able to defeat monsters. The next day, he went to the market to visit a weapons merchant. The merchant approached him cordially, but upon seeing Fate's 2 silver coins, his attitude changed. The merchant then showed a barrel containing weapons that Fate could afford with his money. With no other option, Fate began sifting through the swords inside the barrel. Using his newly acquired identification ability, he examined the status of each sword he held. Upon seeing a black sword, he heard a call from the sword. Startled by the voice, he ignored it initially but eventually raised the sword in his hand. The sword introduced itself as Greed, a one-handed sword. Greed asked Fate to buy it because they were similar. Fate agreed and left his money on the weapons merchant's table after the purchase. The scene shifted to where Raphael and Memel were discussing Roxy's attempt to hire Fate into their family. Memel suggested that Raphael should give Fate challenging lessons for the Vlaric family. However, Raphael did not heed Memel's advice as he saw no purpose in stirring up trouble for now and believed there were plenty of people who could replace Fate. Raphael then left his seat to go to the military base to continue researching how to become immortal. Meanwhile, Fate, now armed with his new sword, was walking on the savannah with the sword by his side. As he walked, a goblin suddenly leaped towards him. Without hesitation, Fate swiftly struck down the goblin, and at the same time, his gluttony ability activated. After Fate dispatched one goblin, the remaining goblins appeared, and Greed ordered Fate to eliminate them. The goblins, not willing to wait any longer, rushed towards Fate to attack him. Fate then parried the onslaught of goblin attacks, systematically taking down each one of them while continuously activating his abilities. After successfully defeating all the goblins, he gained a new ability, and his status increased to 4 digits. Greed then inquired if he was satisfied. Fate felt happy that he didn't hear his stomach growling, something that had never happened before. In this world, adventurers are born with several abilities. They have to kill monsters to level up and increase their base attributes. However, unlike Fate, due to his gluttony skill, he couldn't level up conventionally. Instead, he could steal attributes and abilities from defeated enemies, but he wouldn't gain experience points, keeping Fate at level 1. Greed had a similar situation. Greed asked Fate not to disclose their abilities to others because their abilities went against the laws of the gods. Before leaving the area, Greed advised Fate to collect goblin ears to sell. The scene then shifted to Fate with a collection of goblin ears. He intended to use the money he earned from hunting goblins to buy meat, but Greed inquired about his care first, which Fate ignored as he desired meat. While walking, he bumped into a man who was dragging a young girl with him. The little girl touched Fate's shoulder, and he read her thoughts, in which she was pleading for help. Fate was surprised after hearing the girl's voice. However, the man pulled the young girl away and left Fate alone. Fate, seeing them leave, attempted to use his identification ability, but the man had a skill that concealed his status. Unable to ignore the plea of the little girl, Fate decided to tail the man. After a while, they arrived at his hideout. The young girl was chained to a post, and the man was pulling her hair, stating that she would be the plaything of the holy night. Enraged by the man's actions, Fate intended to attack him but was stopped by Greed because the man was strong enough to pose a challenge.